more than 2/3 of the world behind me on a twin rudder production yacht, I believe I'm in position to voice my counter opinions to some of the incorrect information shared on YouTube. Normally I stay away from commenting other channels, but to get my points out I believe it's necessary. So I apologize in advance if some gets offended by this.
It's ineffective and downright dangerous.
My intentions is only to shine some lights on how incorrect information is not only spread, but even repeated.
It's just because they can make them cheaper because they don't have to build them as strong.
For those of you that's new to my channel, I'm basically grown up with sailing and never looked back. Not only did I grow up in a region where you don't ask if you have a boat, you only ask what kind of boat do you have. My parents' side hustle was a yacht production company producing motor and sailboats. I have been racing a lot of different yachts, and the rich variation in yachts and locations are barely exposed on this channel. Let's face it, Scandinavians don't like to brag, but for this episode I'm gonna do an exception. More important in this context, I have a significant amount of first-hand observations and experience when it comes to rudders and keels after incidents. From one of the busiest stations in Norway, often 10 to 12 callouts a day during high season. Thousands of hours of real-life experience, extended maritime training and education over several years, both as volunteer and full-time employed in maritime operations. Certified for high-speed navigation, all weather, day and night, and this in one of the world's most challenging coastlines. Join me as I'm sailing around the world on Be Free, a Bavaria 55 cruiser. In the previous episode I told you that some of the most interesting sailors are not on YouTube, TikTok or Instagram. They are basically just doing their things out there in the real life. Often with yachts, many influencers tells you that are not good enough, plain dangerous or even having a reckless design. Yet they might have more experience than the top 10 influencers on YouTube combined, without telling you what you can do or not. So I thought it could be a good follow-up on that statement and share my counter-opinions to what I consider as mass production and repeated incorrect information, reaching hundreds of thousands of viewers. I don't claim to be an expert, nor do I claim to have the blueprint. I'm not a naval architect either. But at least in this context, I am a full-time sailor of a modern hull design for many years, with the dual helm and twin rudder configuration. As a contrast to some of the loudest voices out there. Ever wondered why so many gets their cruising dreams destroyed? Many sad stories never reached YouTube, but what they have in common is poor advices and believed in opinions as facts. Buying a blue water yacht. It's the best sales argument in the world if you want to get top dollars for a trash can. Before I take you with me deeper into details, my gentle advice is to be very careful from where you get your advices from. Remember, the vast majority of sailboat owners never do more than coastal cruising, and many old school yachts are definitely not the best choices for this. Even long-distance sailors enjoys long periods of time at anchor. To say easy access to the water or a big swimming platform is only for dock queens is at its best only a false statement. A jealous person that most likely would be more happy with a modern production yacht, even for long-distance sailing. I'm not gonna teach YouTubers how to make sailing videos, nor am I gonna teach you how to change oil filter on a sailboat. Instead, I'm gonna debunk some of the most frequent repeated misinformations about twin rudders, and even give you some tools for the future, identifying some red flags when it comes to strong opinions about your yacht, especially when it comes from someone sailing something designed 50 years ago, telling you everything that's wrong with a modern yacht. Remember, this is how a phone looked like in 1970, and this is how it looks like today. Yes, a phone from 1970 probably lasted longer, but I can do more with the one I have today. Don't take me wrong here, it's many nice yachts still floating from the 70s, and if it's your thing, just go for it. I still believe you can cross oceans in almost anything, as long as it's seaworthy, well maintained, and adequate safety equipments are up to date.
I'm sailing from France, in Brittany, France.
Oh, that's a rough coast. And you actually crossed the Atlantic with this?
I crossed the Atlantic and I tried to cross the canal to Panama.
Okay.
In the Pacific.
It's even possible without an engine, but how smart this is for a long-distance sailor is maybe a topic for another episode. How your opinion on sailing around the world without an engine?
No, you need that thing.
Yeah.
You need that thing.
YouTube is a great source for information, but remember, it's not always very precise, and sometimes you can wonder where they have this kind of information from.
Most modern production boats that have twin rudders, it's just because they can make them cheaper because they don't have to build them as strong.
I'm sorry, but here I believe it's a misunderstanding. Or maybe just great example of how opinions are repeated and leaving you an impression that it's a fact.
Notwithstanding the twin rudders, why is that? Like, I know that they're a little bit easier on the helm.
Yeah.
Is that it?
No,
Like,
it's cheaper.
Is it it's cheaper? Okay, so it's a production sort of...
But let's break down the false statements about twin helm and twin rudder installations. A twin rudder installation is not cheaper. In fact, even though the rudders are slightly smaller than if you have only one, the total cost is more than 50% higher, and in some cases even double the cost. Producing something smarter and with larger volumes can cut some costs for sure. But don't forget all the additional costs with a twin rudder. One of the biggest suppliers of rudders today deliver high quality rudders to many of the biggest brands. The benefit is shared knowledge, expertise and experience. Like from Jeffa that has experience from more than 20,000 rudders. The main reason is wider hulls as part of the evolution. And for those of us having sailed for some years, have experienced how the steering wheels became bigger before it was split into dual helm stations. The main reason for this was because it's reached its limit for how practical a big wheel was in order to still be able sitting on the side to see the sails. The bonus effect was easier access to the transom. In fact, 2 is always better than 1. And today, dual helm station and twin rudder is normal. Not because it's cheaper, but as a result of evolution.
Or do you want sort of a dock queen, these ultra-wide boats?
I'm pretty sure jealous people back in the days also would call the smallest yacht here a dock queen. Because this expression is so old, I believe even the Vikings have heard it before. Nevertheless, as I just pointed out, even the smaller yacht has a pretty easy access to the water, even with only one helm station. Wider body needs twin helm station, as I just explained, and even easier access to your swim platform is a bonus. And not to make a happy wife like some less knowledgeable sailors claims. It's the evolution in hull design that has given us better performance, comfort and even increased safety. A twin rudder might at first glance look more vulnerable, but have you ever thought about how deep a single rudder would need to be on this yacht? The impact of such big rudder is massive if hitting something compared to the smaller rudders. Being shallow compared to a single spade makes them less vulnerable and the force times arm are significant less. Facts that's often overlooked when this topic is discussed. Having sailed so many miles for so many years, I have also first-hand experience about the benefits of redundancy. 2 helm stations are better than 1, and 2 rudders are better than 1 as well. If one fails, you still have one that works. This is the modern definition of a blue water setup. And this fact is something even Dick Beaumont forgot to tell you when he was interviewed by Sailing Millenial Falcon.
Notwithstanding the twin rudders, why is that? Like, I know that they're a little bit easier on the helm.
Yeah.
Is that it?
No,
Like,
it's cheaper.
Is it it's cheaper? Okay, so it's a production sort of...
Maybe because, let's be honest, he tries to sell his yacht. And in my opinion, the time has run away from his old design, with single helm and single rudder. Any sailor with experience from both twin rudder and single rudder knows the difference, and especially when it comes to sailing close reach, a bit overpowered. The increased stability due to a wider hull and better rudder angle twin rudders makes a huge difference. It's a result of innovation and evolution that has given us better performance, comfort and higher threshold for a broach. But hey, I'm not an expert, and still when Mr. Beaumont are trashing his biggest competitor, Halbarassi, it makes absolutely no sense to me. It's like a car salesman trying to tell you a 4-wheel drive is made because it's cheaper. From sales perspective, it's obviously tempting to bash everything that's newer, better and faster, trying to convince people that a retro design is what you should buy, just as he did talking negative about the brand new Halbarassi. When a pretty conservative shipyard like Halbarassi has taken the step into the next generation of hull design, I can assure you this high-end brand have not done it to make it any cheaper. Sadly, if misleading information is repeated enough times, some might believe it in the end. And some might even join the bandwagon and repeat the misleading information. Just like Sailing Uma telling all modern production yachts has a cheaper and even a reckless design. Maybe he watched a 3 years older Millenial Falcon video.
Twin rudders, it's just because they can make them cheaper because they don't have to build them as strong. But I'm pretty sure that that's going to have an aluminum rudder post in it as well.
The question is how he can be pretty sure all the production yachts has aluminium rudder posts, because I'm not so sure this is the fact. I'm sure he means well and have good intention with this. It's only hard to watch all this incorrect and even repeated misinformation.
Strong. But I'm pretty sure that that's going to have an aluminum rudder post in it as well. But the other advantage to some catamarans,
I'm almost surprised no one has told us yet that the main reason people buy a catamaran is because it's cheaper to build 2 hulls than 1. Ironically, this video from Millenial Falcon was titled The Truth About Blue Water Yachts, but in reality it's a subjective sales video promoting Kraken yachts. Lots of opinions and even misleading informations. The challenge for you as a viewer on YouTube could be how to separate opinions from facts and experience from repeated misunderstandings. It's so much and so many misunderstandings and myths and also BS, to be honest.
The big problem is a very big one. They hate to sail upwind.
It's almost fascinating to see someone teaching the world's biggest naval architects about how things should be done or not. Just look at all the yachts only the architect behind my yacht are responsible for. I have even had the privilege of sailing several of the yachts having the FAR design logo, and even been racing with some of them, both with single and twin rudders. Here on my channel I've earlier showed you the difference in hull designs when my friend Kylie and I sailed from Grenada to Martinique. It's only 3 years in age between our yachts, but the hull design is very different. Kylie's Beneteau from 2009 weighed significantly less than B3, and in the light winds I seriously struggled to keep up with her. I almost wondered if she was running her engine.
So this is actually a little bit funny. I'm struggling like shit to catch up with Kylie. She's over there somewhere. So When the wind drops down to 16, 17 knots, I really struggle to catch up with her. She just goes so smooth. So I have to ask her, either she's cheating running the engine or she's a badass sailor. But she's a Kiwi, lots of good sailors from Kiwi. Anyway, it's like the thing is like 15 to 16 knots wind is really not much for me. It's normally I do around 6-7 knots. So I prefer to have from 18-20 and up. Actually 20 to 25 is the sweet spot for this boat. Up to 30 it's totally okay. So if it was 20-25 knots, I would easily do like 12. So yeah, anyway, it is what it is. Not so far, so I'm not running the engine. I'm just gonna enjoy this beautiful day out sailing.
But when the wind increased and the waves were growing, it was goodbye Kylie. Not only did I point much higher, but sailed several knots faster. Not because I'm a better sailor than Kylie, because she really knows what she's doing and have done it for a long time with her yacht. It's neither because the Beneteau is not fast and a good yacht either. It's simply because B3 has a modern hull design with twin rudders and wider body. This combination makes her heel less and sail faster. Given the facts, it's not much of a difference in overall length, the displacement speed should not be that different. But this is real-life comparison under equal conditions. And the difference was as much as 4 knots faster and pointing higher. For those who have been racing, understand what this means.
The big problem is a very big one. They hate to sail upwind.
As you probably understand, I strongly disagree in this statement, opinion, or what to call it. The biggest problem is some might believe this kind of information. Long time ago, I was frequently racing with my friends on a X-yacht. This 12-meter one design were a bit early out and in many ways ahead of its time. If I was told to place it in my very simplified evolution map, I would say it would be a hybrid between classic design and wide-body fat-ass design. And fun enough, this is among one of my earlier experience why the rudder needed to be so extremely deep. As I point out earlier, I'm not a naval architect and have a huge respect for Jeppesen. However, how I experienced this was it's too narrow for a twin rudder and too flat and wide aft for a single rudder. So on a close reach, I experienced my 11-meter one design to handle and perform slightly better, due to less difference in buoyancy aft and forward. But this is of course only feelings and my opinions, with 2 different yachts with pretty similar hull, keel and rudder design. What I'm trying to say is when Hallberg Rassi as an example comes along on modern twin rudder design 10 to 12 years after the far designed Bavaria, it might not be a bad idea. For a high quality brand with strong history for blue water capacities, it's obvious they are a bit conservative. Maybe to avoid ending up in some between situations, like my example of the X119. Without claiming this is facts, more to draw a picture for you and my next argument. So they just wait until they know it's time to upgrade. To be 40 to 50 years behind in hull design seems a bit too conservative in my opinion. I believe this could be the reason for his strong fight and arguments against modern hull design. And of course these strong opinions and convincing sales arguments aligns with the yachts many influencers are sailing themselves, making it understandable even incorrect information is being repeated. He do have some valid points and good arguments as well, but all the fear-mongering and misleading information in between makes it less interesting, at least to me. Just as a side note about bolt-on keels that he spends a lot of energy on, he refers to some undocumented numbers of keels falling off. I'm not saying he is lying, but when he claims several hundreds of yachts have lost their bolt-on keels, it comes in great contrast to verified numbers. There are around 33 million pleasure boats worldwide. It's estimated that the numbers of sailboats are somewhere between 2.6 and 3 million. Over the last 40 years, between 75 and 80 has lost their keels. And inside these numbers there is many racing boats. The biggest challenge here is poor statistics with exact reasons or even prehistoric important data like groundings. Nevertheless, the risk is overall extremely small. Depending on which statistics and number you use, it can be anything from almost nothing to 0.0178% risk. The risk of dying in a car accident is 0.95%. Even though this is among the most frequent asked questions over the last 3 years, based on what I've just shown you, it doesn't really make me sleep bad. All I can say, my own experience from decades of sailing and even from search and rescue, fire on board outnumber loss of keels and rudders by far. So if you enjoy being worried about things and need a new thing, this fact is something to think about. Especially for all those playing along with homemade electric boats. I believe these numbers will explode in the near future, just as intense as having a propane container inside a boat. Still, the number one reason for a yacht to sink is lack of maintenance, especially on through hulls and raw water connections on engines and generators. But let's jump back to some facts about twin rudders. It's several reasons for why most modern yachts of today have moved up to twin rudders and twin helm stations. And this might surprise many of you. A twin rudder configuration are even better and stronger solution than many skeg-hung rudder solutions. The safety of a skeg-hung rudder really depends on its design, but most importantly, when it was designed and built. Back in the days, they did not have the tools of today, nor did they have good calculation in where and in how strong the sacrificial part should be in case of a hard impact. This to reduce risk of compromising the hull integrity. And not exactly as a fun fact, but still worth mentioning, is last year when I crossed the entire Pacific, the only yacht I'm familiar with that went down was a so-called blue water yacht with skeg-hung rudder and full keel. Not many heard about that, but when a brand new modern yacht goes down this year, it goes viral. I will come back to this. One thing many of the influencers with seriously old yachts have in common is they always use their old yachts when concluding or explaining why modern yachts are crap. Most likely because it's the only experience they have.
If you look at the front of older boats, here's Lady K for example.
A mass production boat designed in late 60s and production in the 70s. Not very different from the sailboat I grew up with. Also with a skeg-hung rudder, just like Lady K. I'm not gonna comment much on his boat. All I can say, I don't share his love for boats designed in the 70s and built in the 80s. There were no such things as CE certification back then, but they did have some formulas indicating this was something they called havseiler, which if direct translated to English means ocean sailor, or blue water cruiser if you like. And here comes a fun fact for you. Back then this was a production yacht, and the numbers was pretty good for Norwegian standards. Not to forget, it was in the late 80s. The reason I know this is this yacht center making this and several other boats was my parents' side hustle for quite some time. As a last fun fact, this solid build, old school design earning the title Blue Water Yacht back then, lost its skeg-hung rudder with a massive solid steel rod being bent in rough seas during an ocean race. My father and his crew were rescued by the rescue vessel Ragnhild Berg, a ship even I had the great pleasure of working on some decades later. My point is, things can happen no matter what you are sailing, and trust me, I have seen and experienced a lot. Skeg-hung rudders are not necessarily as strong and good many like to believe, especially if they are old. Not to join the fear-mongering group, but only over the last 16 months in remote places, it's not sailors with spade rudders I have met having problems. It has exclusively been yachts that's 40 to 50 years old with a skeg-hung rudder, similar to the yachts the haters of modern design are sailing. I just want to point out that sailing around the world with a 50-year-old skeg-hung rudder might be a false feeling of superior safety feature, even if the rudder stock is in steel. In fact, it's maybe even a greater reason to be concerned sailing an old yacht. Pointing at aluminium rudder stocks might be a misunderstanding.
But I'm pretty sure that that's going to have an aluminum rudder post in it as well.
I don't really understand what he tries to tell us about the aluminium rudder post, but it for sure sends some signals that might be based on misunderstandings. Several channels jumped on the viral video about Ida Lill sinking in the Pacific this year, often repeating or even jumping to conclusions. I've also worked with evaluation reports and cooperated with professionals trying to puzzle bits and pieces back to get a picture of what led to an accident or what went wrong. From my experience, it's very rare that what you see and think at first glance is the factors that caused it all. What you see is more a result of many factors. Speculating on a yacht that's most likely resting at the seafloor 4,000 meters down makes absolutely no sense, at least when it's done by amateurs. As I said, I don't really understand what he means when he's pointing at the rudder posts as if aluminium is a problem. The reason some swear to aluminium is not to save money, not always to save weight either. Steel does not last forever, and all the rudder problems I have seen lately, but also decades back, has been related to water penetration in old rudders, with rusty rudder stocks expanding and even accelerating the problem. No matter rudder design, if it's a spade or skeg hung, the main problem is age. The scary part with stainless is even though it looks perfect on the outside, it can be overdue to be replaced.
Looks good.
When we start to remove the rig to replace it, the pin goes around.
Just as many influencers are very fast to tell you it's cheap production yacht and like it's automatically the reason the rig come off. In reality, however, it's again a series of factors, and it can even be amateurs that have done the refitting, like Kylie experienced.
Because this part should have been mounted other side, so as it can pivot to give the cable a little bit of slack and a little bit of movement, and that's something that they did not do. So we have no movement in the port whatsoever. The cable is pulling by all its force and all its tension to get things straightened out, and the thing that just takes the force and straights out is not a good one. So this is something that would eventually have broken down, and well, with the mast laying next to the boat instead of on the boat as a result. So yeah, no, this is not terrible.
Good. If Kylie had lost her rig, it would be only the rods left to tell a story, because the rig would be overboard and it would be difficult to expose what was the actual problem.
It could have been just disastrous. So I'm very thankful that you spotted it, Thomas.
But just as in the case, jumping to conclusions, only looking at the video of Ida Lina sinking. Is it the cause or the result? The blueprint sits at 4,000 meters deep. Having a bunch of influencers pointing at rudder stocks is sadly just irrelevant. But let's jump back to one of the latest YouTube statements about twin rudders.
Steering one of these at slow marina speeds is like putting a kayak paddle in the water to steer the boat. It's ineffective and downright dangerous. Ask me how I know.
It's fair enough that he did not feel he could handle this yacht, bigger and wider than his old 35-footer. We have all been there at some point. And when you lack experience, knowledge and understanding, it for sure can give you a scary experience. Different yachts moves and behaves different. Some pull in direction of the propeller and some does not even steer at all when reversing. Just as an example, a classic yacht with the propeller straight in front of the rudder is more challenging to dock than a racing boat with the propeller far from its rudder. Guess you need some experience to understand this. Some old school designs with propeller coming out of the keel, like older ML yachts, are sharing some of the effects a twin rudder has with lack of propeller wash on its rudder. However, the twin rudder has more effective rudders, making it even easier than, for instance, an older ML. How you plan and execute your docking reveals your experience, no matter what you sail.
Entering Shelter Bay Marina in style.
This docking is not much to brag about, as it's dirt easy, but it's a good example how I'm positioning myself upwind to have the margins on my side, and also a perfect curve into the berth. I don't have much space here, but with twin rudders I have super control even going this slow. I did not use my bow thruster at all, as I really don't need it. In my opinion, there are only 3 things that can mess up your docking. The first is obviously a poor execution based on limited experience. The second is using a bow thruster. The third is someone at the dock starting to pull the lines too early. Let's hear the statement from an influencer with 100,000 subscribers all over again.
Steering one of these at slow marina speeds is like putting a kayak paddle in the water to steer the boat. It's ineffective and downright dangerous. Ask me how I know. That's why all these twin blade boats have bow thrusters, because the rudders alone are inadequate for marina maneuvering. They simply need a bow thruster to make them work.
I feel sorry for him, honestly I do, because what he actually do, he tried to bash a boat he has been invited out to sail. All he do to experienced sailors is to reveal that he actually lack experience, knowledge and understanding. I don't know, it's almost embarrassing to watch. Let's raise the bar a few steps then. Fine maneuvering with strong ocean currents, a bit wind, and not only taking my friend Holly on her tow, but even docking 2 boats at the same time, also without a bow thruster.
So I'm getting a tow now. I'm going 7.2 knots, which I think is some of the fastest this boat has ever seen.
Be free. Go ahead, sir. Yeah, good afternoon. I'm asking for permission to enter the breakwater. I'm towing another sailboat into Shelter Bay Marina. Over. Okay, be free. Very good afternoon. Welcome to Panama again, sir. Okay, just requesting you be safe at the fleet.
So the twin rudder, bow thruster reliant fat bottom boat is eventually going to fail you in a tight situation when it matters the most, which sucks.
I did not even notice I had Gek on my side, docking the both of us at the same time. Absolutely no stress, 100% control without a bow thruster.
That's a hilarious comparison from up here.
If you don't understand the principles of safe docking, you might be focusing on wrong things like bow thrusters, instead of doing the right things. It doesn't really matter if it's a twin rudder, single rudder, short or long keel. In fact, it doesn't even matter if you are operating advanced vessels with dual jet systems either. I've also been teaching and training future captains in how to maneuver complex water jet systems, and even when it was necessary or not, to use thrusters. Some learn it fast and some never crack the code. And if someone blamed the technology for their own failures, I would back then, as an assessor, not approve their promotion to become a captain, because what they needed was more training. I'm gonna end this video here, but as a friendly advice, do not put too much trust in what you see on YouTube. It's in the real world you really learn things, and the best yacht for cruising is the one you already have. Because this is a yacht you know, its limitation and its flaws. But most important, know your own limitations. End of the day, it's not about how strong your chain is, but more about the weakest link. Sadly, many believe only because they sail old yachts, it means it's bulletproof. forgetting about old rudder stocks, incomplete pin-to-pin rig replacements, including chain plates. And to give Mr. Beaumont one bonus point, I believe he is right when he claims we will see increased amount of bolt-on keels with problems. But the main reason might just as well be the increasing numbers of 40 to 50 years old yachts going cruising, without having replaced their keel bolts. As a last and final fun fact, most likely Uma would not be qualified for a CE Class A after today's raised standards, and what they have done with it never even get a CE classification whatsoever. In fact, in Europe they will not even be allowed to sell it before after 5 years, still without a CE classification. So maybe it's not so relevant listening to strong opinions about modern yachts from influencers like this.